Hi, today we will recap the movie The Hateful Eight, directed by Quentin Tarantino. Brace yourselves for a fun recap. Watch out and take care. The scene is set in 1870. Cold and snowy mountains all around with no signs of civilization in sight. A bounty hunter and Union Army veteran cavalry, Major Marquis Warren, is heading towards Red Rock, Wyoming territory with 3 bounty corpses. But a stagecoach driver, O.B. Jackson, finds him stranded after his horse gives out. Faced with a blizzard, Warren hitches a ride with Jackson, but Jackson tells him that it's up to bounty hunter John Ruth, the hangman, to decide who had already booked the stagecoach. Warren goes to talk to him, but John points his gun at him and tells Warren to unarm himself and approach him with his hands raised. Warren complies, and when he approaches the stagecoach, John recognizes Warren since they shared a dinner once and had previously bonded over Warren's personal letter from Abraham Lincoln. Warren finds John handcuffed to fugitive crazy Daisy DeMurg, whom he is taking to Red Rock to be hanged. John explains that Daisy has a price of $10,000 on her head, which is why John is paying extra for privacy, but Warren insists that he already has enough bodies for him to receive enough payment. To prove it, Warren shows John the necessary paperwork, and John reluctantly allows Warren on board. While they're riding together, Warren is surprised to see how enthusiastic John is about watching Daisy get hanged. He says that he does not see his bounties getting hanged because he never brings one back alive. However, John is known as the hangman because he only catches his bounties alive to be hanged. John asks to see Warren's personal letter from Abraham Lincoln again, and though Warren doesn't like taking it in and out of the envelope, he does so for John's sake. John becomes emotional after reading the letter and tries to educate Daisy on its importance, but Daisy spits on it. Angry, Warren slaps her hard enough for her to fall out of the coach, taking John with her. Warren stops the coach and John removes the cuffs from his hands. Warren finds his letter and spits on Daisy. Suddenly, Jackson tells John that yet another man has appeared, asking for a ride. John becomes furious and accuses Warren of running a scheme against him since too many people are walking around during a blizzard. He tells Warren to cuff himself as a precaution. John recognizes this man as Chris Mannix, whose father, Erskine, led a lost causer militia called Mannix's Marauders. Chris claims to be Red Rock's new sheriff. Since Chris is now responsible for paying them for their bounties, John has no choice but to allow him inside, but tells Chris to put on handcuffs. Chris refuses to and threatens to inform the people of Red Rock how John treated their new sheriff. John has no choice but to allow Chris inside, but tells Jackson to return Warren's weapons and forms an alliance with him to protect himself from Chris. During the ride, Chris offers to pay for their dinner once they reach Red Rock, but John refuses to break bread with the Confederate rebels. Chris and Daisy reveal that there is a Confederate bounty on Warren's head for breaking out of and setting fire to a prisoner of war camp. Because of this bounty, many men came to hunt for him, but Warren managed to take care of all of them. However, Chris reveals that when Warren burned the war camp, he also caused the deaths of many Yankee soldiers. For this reason, despite Warren escaping towards the north, the Union forces honorably discharged him from the force due to his previous stellar war record. John has difficulty believing it and accuses the rebels of being a greater menace to society. When Chris's racism reaches extreme lengths, Warren threatens to send him out to freeze to death, which shuts Chris up. They seek refuge from the blizzard at Minnie's Haberdashery, tended by Bob, a Mexican who claims to be watching the haberdashery in Minnie's and her husband Sweet Dave's absence. Bob asks John to help him tie up the horses, but John puts that responsibility on Warren and Chris. John kicks the door open and nails it shut behind him due to the force of the blizzard. Inside, he finds the local hangman Oswaldo Mowbray, Cowboy Joe Gage, and Confederate General Sanford Smithers. Oswaldo asks John to show him his warrant on account of a suspicion that he's kidnapping Daisy. When John produces it, Oswaldo introduces himself as the local hangman, and the two become friendly. Meanwhile, Warren, Chris, Jackson, and Bob finish tying up the horses and draw a line in order to feed them. John and Oswaldo are talking about the concept of justice and frontier justice when John becomes curious about the cowboy Joe Gage, who is busy writing his own life story. John tells him to share his life story with him, and Joe reveals that he's going 9 miles outside of Red Rock to meet his mother for Christmas. John finds it funny since Joe doesn't look like the type of person to spend Christmas with his mother and becomes suspicious of him. John then meets Confederate General Sanford Smithers, who does not wish to speak with him. Suddenly, Jackson and Chris return and have to kick the door in and nail it shut afterwards similarly. Chris and Oswaldo become acquaintances over their shared profession in justice. Oswaldo mistakenly thinks that Chris shared letters with Abraham Lincoln and asks him to see them, But John reveals that it's actually Warren who has them, which shocks them all. Meanwhile, Warren asks Bob about Minnie, the original owner of the haberdashery, but Bob says that she went to the north to visit her mother and left Bob in charge, which surprises Warren, who didn't know Minnie still had a mother. Bob asks if Warren thinks he is a liar, but Warren says he's only suspicious. Chris recognizes Smithers as a war hero, and the two become acquaintances over their shared rebel cause against the Union. Chris offers Smithers his own blanket and goes to get him coffee. Smithers reveals that he is planning to erect a cenotaph, an empty tomb, for his missing son, Chester Charles. Suddenly, Bob and Warren return, kick the door in, and nail it shut. Warren and Smithers recognize each other, as the two had fought in the American Civil War against each other previously, and Warren wants him dead as revenge for ordering the execution of black prisoners of war at Baton Rouge. Before the two can fight, Oswaldo breaks their argument, reminding them of the urgency of the blizzard outside and that it is illegal to shoot an unarmed person. He suggests dividing the haberdashery into two parts, one belonging to the Yankees and the other to the Confederates, with the dinner table being the neutral territory. At night, John mouths his concern about Joe to Warren, believing that any one of them may attack them at night to take away his bounty. Warren thinks he's being paranoid, but John is adamant. He announces the bounty on Daisy's head to everyone and asks if anyone will stop him from stepping forward, but no one does. He and Warren decide to disarm everyone as a precaution. He then sends Jackson to dump the guns outside. The entire company sits down for dinner. Suddenly, Jackson returns from the blizzard, almost frozen, covers himself in a bear's skin, and lies down by the fire. Chris tries to talk with Warren about his letter from Lincoln, but Warren is clearly not interested in having any conversation with him. He asks to see it, but Warren refuses to reveal it. Chris surmises that the Lincoln letter is false, and Warren agrees that it's false. John suddenly gets furious at Warren, but Warren responds to John's disappointment by saying his forged letter buys him leeway with whites. However, John accuses Warren of tricking him, and Warren, furious, sits with Smithers instead. The two start a conversation about Smithers' life after the war, and when Smithers mentions his son, Warren says that he knew him. Warren puts one of his guns next to Smithers and claims that he murdered Smithers' son, who had tried to claim the bounty on him from the Confederates. Chris tries to calm the situation down by telling Smithers that Warren is lying to provoke him, but Warren goes into extreme details about how he humiliated Smithers' son before killing him. When Smithers reaches for the gun, Warren kills him. However, during this confrontation, the coffee is poisoned by someone, which Daisy silently witnesses. To pass the time, Daisy sits down to play the guitar. Jackson returns from dumping Smithers' body, and he and John go to drink the coffee. However, when Daisy sings a song in which she hints at John's death, John becomes furious, breaks her guitar, and handcuffs Daisy to himself again. Daisy watches as Chris also reaches for the coffee, but suddenly John and Jackson spit out blood. John punches Daisy and warns everyone that the coffee is poison. He tries to kill Daisy, but she kills the dying John Ruth with his own gun, and Jackson dies himself. Warren disarms Daisy, leaving her shackled to John's corpse. He then holds the others at gunpoint and lines them against the wall. However, he brings Chris to his side, who has nearly drunk the poisoned coffee himself. Warren takes it from her when Daisy tries to unlock herself using John's key. Chris believes that Joe Gage is responsible for the poisoning, but Warren tells him to calm down. When Warren asked who made the coffee, Bob said it was John himself who made it. Warren deduces that Bob is responsible for it and responsible for the disappearance of Minnie, since the stew they ate today tasted exactly like Minnie's stew. Furthermore, there's a stain of blood on Sweet Dave's chair. Moreover, Bob couldn't have been working for Minnie, as Minnie was racist against Mexicans and didn't allow them inside. However, Bob replies that he couldn't have poisoned the coffee since he was playing the piano at that time. But Warren isn't concerned with the coffee right now, but the disappearance of Minnie and Sweet Dave. Warren proves that Bob is lying about looking after the haberdashery and kills him. Realizing that they still don't know who poisoned the coffee, Warren deduces that the intention behind it was to free Daisy and threatens to force Daisy into drinking the poisoned coffee if the culprit didn't speak. Joe admits that he poisoned the coffee. An unknown man hiding under the floorboards shoots Warren in the groin. Oswaldo shoots a distracted Chris, and Chris shoots back at him. When Chris points the gun at Joe, Joe says he has no gun on him. A flashback from earlier in the morning shows Bob, Oswaldo, Joe, and Daisy's brother Jody arriving at the lodge hours earlier. Smithers is already inside the lodge playing chess. When everyone got busy, they proceeded to kill Minnie, Sweet Dave, and all the employees and customers except Smithers, whom they spared to create a believable setting in exchange for his silence. Once they finished hiding the bodies, cleaning the store, and hiding weapons for future use, Jody hid in the cellar as John, Daisy, Jackson, Warren, and Chris arrived. In the present, Warren and Chris, both seriously wounded, hold Daisy, Joe, and Oswaldo at gunpoint and threaten to kill them should Jody not reveal himself. Jody opens the basement door, throws his weapons, and slowly reveals himself, but is executed by Warren. Joe then sits on a table, underneath which he has a gun hidden. The surviving gang members reveal that Jody was actually a gang leader with a $50,000 bounty on his head. After his death, Daisy is the leader of the gang. They claim 15 hired guns are waiting in Red Rock and offer a deal. If Chris kills Warren, they will spare him and allow him to collect the bounty on the dying Oswaldo and the deceased Bob, whose real names are revealed as English Pete Highcox and Marco the Mexican. Warren finds the situation humorous and asks Joe for his real name, which is Grouch Douglas. When Chris wonders whether they should kill all the gang members and claim the bounty on their heads, Daisy reminds him that Jody's gang will come here the moment the snow melts, which is the only time Chris and Warren can leave the lodge. Should they decide to leave now, they would be unable to carry all the bodies. However, Warren shoots Daisy and kills Highcox when he tries to persuade Chris. Grouch suddenly grabs a pistol hidden under a table, and Warren and Chris kill him. Warren then points his gun at Daisy, but his bullets have run out. Warren asks Chris for his gun, but Chris starts talking with Daisy about her deal. Chris deduces she is lying and denies the deal. However, before he can shoot her, Chris faints from blood loss. Daisy tries to reach for his gun, but John's body keeps her down. She hacks into John's and goes for a gun, but Chris reawakens and wounds her. Chris finally decides to shoot Daisy, but Warren tells him to hang Daisy from the rafters to honor John's memory. As they lie dying, Chris asks for Warren's fake Lincoln letter, which Warren finally gives to him. Chris reads it out loud, complimenting its detail, and the movie ends.